Welcome back, Baseline community, to the long-awaited September General Assembly.
Yeah, it's been a few weeks since we've live streamed just because of the summer holiday. Um, Everyone in the community was heads down in their work or on cool trips or spending time with their families. So we took things a little slow, but we are all still very much here and working on the key priorities for Baseline and excited to give some updates today and hopefully have some more frequent shows coming up for the rest of the year with more guests and community members that are constantly joining the community or closely watching. I'll give some updates on some future show guests that are in the queue in our outreach updates. But with that, let me just check out our agenda. So briefly, we'll go over outreach updates. We'll talk about the simple reference implementation, also known as BRI 3, Baseline Reference Implementation 3, and the progress going on that large effort that is supposed to be in fully open source, simple implementation of a very hefty, complicated protocol. And then we will go through interop workgroup updates. Interop is the key roadmap item for this year, which will also be extended into next year. And we'll give more info on that during the roadmap updates, as well as TSC updates and standards. And then we will have an open floor. So we'll see if any of our members on stream want to chat about what they're working on or learning about. With that, we'll cover our agenda today. So I'll kick us off. The outreach team is not meeting at this time on our normal cadence. We are all just chatting async on the key priorities. Alongside the key technical priorities, the outreach team is focusing on ensuring that logs are produced that match the relevant updates and progress for things like the simple reference implementation. There are still monthly TSC blogs. So the last one was about the global supply chain coordination using the Baseline protocol, published by Maron from SAP, who's on the TSC. So our committee members are still publishing a monthly blog based on their interests or different viewpoints, ideas, things like that related to the Baseline protocol. And then also we are still attending conferences throughout the whole community. So we have community members who go to various technical blockchain standards or industry specific conferences representing the Baseline protocol. If we equip them with the right materials for the audiences that they'll be speaking to. The most recent one, a few of our Mesh R&D members went to Permissionless in Austin, which was a finance heavy conference. And it was small because of the bear market, but it was actually a really successful and well liked conference by many of the attendees because it was pretty intimate, and those who go to these conferences during a rough market in the crypto space, for example, are clearly building and very passionate about it. So it was a really unique and exciting experience. We were talking a lot about Baseline because the interop use case that will be talked about in a little while is related to finance. So there was a clear fit there for potential Web3 or non-Web3 companies that might be interested in use cases around synchronizing banking data. And we were able to make some contacts that may want to start watching the work going on in this community and leveraging it at some point. Yeah, so aside from that, really the outreach team is just staying in touch with the technical work going on, making sure that it's digestible to those that are following the work in blog, article, and other formats. So we have materials that supplement the work going on as we get through it. With that, I will also hand over to Mark, who has a few recent blogs to walk through that have relevance to Baseline.
Sure, thanks, Sonal. Yeah, so the Mesh team has been hard at work creating things that use the Baseline protocol and standard. And we've released a couple of blogs that outline a couple things that we're doing that use the standard. And the first one is about automating billing and settlement with the baseline protocol. This is based on a real project that we're doing with the Telecoms Consortium that focuses on automating billing and settlement for digital services that these telecom companies are providing. And it just goes over the main components of the protocol, the zero knowledge component, how the baseline protocol uses zero trust principles, how it combines DIDs and VCs for an identity layer for this protocol, and combines these three components of the protocol, not only for privacy and security, but also for regulatory compliance for companies when they're executing these business processes in a multi-party context, of course. And another great part about this blog is how it actually goes into how billing and settlement affects what we're calling the digital business trilemma, the constraints of performance, security, and decentralization within any given business process, and how the baseline protocol can actually allow all three of these things to occur at once instead of only two at most in any given situation. And it also goes over the different industries that the baseline protocol can affect most greatly, specifically telecom, healthcare, and supply chain, all industries that have multi-party processes that are entrenched in how services are provided in each of these industries. In telecom, to provide services, a lot of people have to work together. In healthcare, to provide services for customers, data has to be exchanged through a lot of different parties. And of course, in supply chain, a lot of people have to work together to get products, materials from point A to point B. So definitely check out that article about billing and settlement. And then another article that we have is called The Future of ERP, which talks about how the baseline protocol can use the ZK-EVM and create a sort of multi-party ERP system where companies can use a shared trusted execution environment using the ZK-EVM, use the general purpose zero knowledge computation afforded by the ZK-EVM to automatically prove processes, use the blockchain for its self-sovereign identity capabilities, and basically take all of the difficult parts of ERP like point-to-point integrations, difficulties, all these difficulties with integrating different systems and improve it, make it much more resilient, make it cheaper, increase the agility that companies can collaborate with each other, whether you're onboarding different companies or offboarding them for different processes, and making it all private and secure with all the cryptographic capabilities that blockchain offers. And I think that's a pretty good overview of what the blogs are without just like spelling all of it out. So I'll leave it to the audience to take a look at these articles and learn a little bit more about them. They've been shared through the Mesh LinkedIn, and you can also go to the Mesh website and go to the blog section to read them as well. So definitely check those out.
And the baseline blog section, they're also there. Awesome.
Yeah, it's great. It was a great read. I sorry I joined in late, but I enjoyed reading those. Because I mean, as an ERP guy myself, I think about this quite often of like, hey, what is the actual business use case of baseline, right? And you reflect on, what are the high value processes in supply chain and billing and settlement, right? Think about what are the common friction points that are all multi-party, right? Like, hey, did this come in on time? Did we invoice this correctly? Right? That's actually not just a single ERP problem, that's a multiple ERP problem of like, everyone has to have the same point of view. Everyone's after like the stereotypical single pane of glass, if you will. But it's challenging because like, hey, the vendor wants to know if you did the goods receipt, did the goods receipt and invoice receipt the way they expected, right? Because they expect to be paid, right? that's where we're trying to put, baseline is like into those core processes, right? What would you say to, like, how would you, I have this question, and this is kind of just general to anyone. Like, how would you work with an enterprise who said, that's a really cool idea, but it seems pretty risky to do, right? What are your thoughts around, like, just the kind of the risk level to get people over that?
I think it just starts with building trust with your clients. And the approach from our team is just starting small with a proof of concept, and having enterprises get more comfortable with the concept of a multi-party ERP system, or really just like any sort of trusted shared execution environment. So it's all about giving enterprises the control, permissioning, warm feelings that they need to actually feel comfortable using that stuff. So that's how we're focusing on it.
Very cool. I think about use cases. One, building the trust. Sometimes even like going for an even lower risk use case, even though the baseline is going to work the same way. But I think what a lot of companies think about when they're handling data is what is the risk level to spillage of this data, right? Whether it's billing data or supply chain data or sustainability, like how does this go if like this gets leaked out, especially if it's on a blockchain, right? So one of the unique things I think is you have to kind of dance around the fire with ZK is really good for protecting extremely private information. In fact, it's even purpose built for that. How do you motivate someone or a business to actually do it is probably the biggest challenge, right? Of like, hey, you're going to put this in a ZK proof. It's not going to reveal the data, but it's there, right? It's else. Your data is actually elsewhere. It's not in the ZK proof. It's just a proof, right? That's always I feel like that breaks people's brain sometimes to think about a proof, not the actual data, but a proof, right? And how does that evolve into some computation?
Yeah, it's true. And a really great way to actually show that for companies is showing them how the ZK EVM works, because you can run an entire function, through an Ethereum smart contract, and all that's deposited on the L1 is just a proof. You can actually show them that. You can show them, hey, that transaction that you run, here's the proof for it, and you can't actually see any data. It's just that proof. And that's a pretty powerful thing for companies to see and start to think about.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for that discussion. All right, Yoav, do you want to tell us what's going on in the simple reference implementation world?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Okay. You guys looking at GitHub, right? I see nods.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, cool. So the major update from the last time we discussed kind of via this platform is that milestone 4 is more or less completed. It's pending 3 PRs, but all of the issues kind of have been worked on. These PRs now just need their review process to take place, and then maybe some changes that have been requested, but for the most part, just need to be merged into main. And then milestone 4 will be complete, which is kind of a major milestone that's been underway for quite some time. There's been a lot of issues related to this milestone. A lot of work has been put into it. And we can just take a look at what's left here. So a big part of this milestone, and I'm going to pull up actually the grant real quick. A big part of this milestone and its acceptance criteria, its ability to kind of prove that it's been completed, is the ability to run end-to-end tests across all of the new code that's been added in within this sort of being called the beta. So the last one of the last pieces of the puzzle here is to extend all of these tests that were created in previous milestones, and to ensure that that acceptance criteria is being met and that all of the necessary tests have been implemented in order to kind of accurately display that milestone 4 has been completed. So there is this PR here, 738, which adds in quite a great deal of testing in order to, like I said, cover all of those bases within this end-to-end test here. Doing all of the things that you would expect, submitting transactions, verifying the results, checking that if things don't go the happy path, that they will still kind of reflect on that correctly, that the system will understand what's happening, and then all of the necessary workflows, DTOs, agents, things that will be required to kind of transact in order to do all of those functions. So that's kind of the last major piece, is that end-to-end. There's also, like I said, that secondary PR that just needs to be merged as well, or the secondary issue, which I believe has 2 PRs actually, which is to store the addressable hash here. There's a PR open from Keith and then one from Shri here. And again, with the merging of these two, and I believe this one is ready to go with all of its comments resolved. Yes, so this one can be merged, and then Shri's can come. I think it's just pending Shri's, if I'm not mistaken. So once Shri's is, no, this one's first. Okay, so that one can be merged, and then Shri's can be reviewed. And then once that's been reviewed and any comments are left, changes are made, that can also be kind of signed off on, and then close out that issue. And with the closing of that issue, we'll begin, as well as the end-to-end one, we'll begin milestone 5. So if milestone 4 was the beta, milestone 5 is meant to be version 1. It's the last milestone of the full grant and is meant to be the complete release, the starting point of BRI 3 as it stands. So this milestone is meant to support general business case with all the features being part of the grant. Everything within scope here should be included in this milestone. Everything then should be covered with end-to-end tests, like I was saying for milestone 4 and previous, which makes its acceptance criteria, again, to ensure that tests are run, everything's verified, and everything within its scope is being tested and is working correctly. And with the completion of milestone 5 would complete this BRI 3, the SRI project, which has been kind of a major focus for the roadmap and the core dev team as a whole, and would be very exciting to get kind of under our belt and move forward now with that being done. In order to kind of get to that state of completing milestone 5, we are using here this milestones tab to track milestones. So milestone 4 had 17 in total issues that were given the flag. I believe we began using the flag kind of late into this milestone, but milestone 5 will be using this flag the whole way through. There's 10 preliminary issues that have already been opened in the last week or so. I believe 2 of them are already picked up, and then I think one of them even has already a PR. And the
Can
team
you talk us
Go
through
ahead.
like some of like the functional details of these issues and what's being worked on, like for a non-dev?
Sure. So we can go kind of back in time a little bit. The team meets every Thursday, so tomorrow's meeting is where we're going to flesh out a lot of milestone 5 issues and add details and architectural decision making to ensure that it'll kind of all fall in line, so we can go through milestone 4 and look at things that have already been completed. A lot of it is following our process of first creating a document of some kind or a discussion somewhere in which the overall framework of the issue trying to be completed is presented to the team, where it can be made sure that it follows everything that's done previously, right? So that all the code is written in a standardized way and the architecture can work with itself and uses the right libraries and everything, right? The best practices, standards, all of that. Once the team kind of is on the same page of how it's going to be written and what's going to be implemented, the dev can then kind of go ahead and work through it. So you have things like implement circuit from work step 3 from the use case docs. So we have the docs, right, is being referenced, and this is a document that the team put together in order to kind of, again, be on the same page and have an understanding of how the use case, what the use case will be and how it will flow through. And you can see here, there's quite a lot of back and forth in order to kind of get where everybody wants to be and be on the same page. And then with documents like these, people are able to, like in this case, I think Shri is and Keith are able to take this document, create issues related to it that would then break this apart into kind of sub tasks, because each one of these things, right, would be a task in order to implement. And each one of those tasks can then be created, right? Generate and store content addressable hash, for example, or yeah, I believe I just have this open twice, but for example, you create these kind of subtasks and then somebody can go through, pick up that subtask and propose how to go about it, right? And then without going into all the code, they would then kind of be able to implement that in the way that they deem kind of appropriate along the lines of the documentation that they had already pitched to the team. And then the final step of that process is a PR where there can be some back and forth if anything isn't quite aligned with how the team had expected it to be. And then barring any comments for revision or any update changes, it would then get pushed to main. So in this case, to store content addressable hash, this PR by Shri, it implements some Snark.js, some CirCom circuits here, a service for it, an interface here, you know, several things that are all kind of contained within this one subtask that can be outlined within, you know, some greater overall workflow that's trying to be accomplished. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Awesome.
Sorry for throwing you off, but thanks for walking
Oh,
through.
all good. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's just a lot of code just being pushed through at this point. Not really, you know, we could go through some of these PRs and actually go through the code, but there's a lot of PRs that are being open and closed. And I think for the purposes of a GA, the bigger picture is that these subtasks are being reviewed as a team, right? And everything is kind of coming together and being knocked down. Yeah, so like I said, the team meets every Thursday. We'll be meeting tomorrow in order to go through milestone 5. And that meeting is kind of an open invite to anybody, not necessarily just those that are participating daily in this. If anybody wants to join in and be a spectator even, or be involved in how milestone 5 is shaped, as far as all of these PRs or all of these issues are opened and filled out and kind of created so that we have these subtasks for everybody to then pick up and go through. That meeting will take place tomorrow. So yeah, again, open invite. We would love kind of the more participation, the better as far as this goes. We have a new team member, Boris, who joined the group recently and has already picked up some work, has already merged in, I believe, 1 PR and has a second open. So welcoming him to this team for the final milestone. And anything else, Sonal, or shall we move into interop?
You want to pass it to me real quick? I can do a little bit of a code review of some past PRs that have been made in milestone 4, just to catch everybody up on the current state of kind of what's been accomplished since our last GA. What do you think?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, I'll do a little screen share. Hopefully it's the right one. Let me know what you see.
We're looking at GitHub, yeah.
Okay, so hello everybody. Hello viewer. It's me, Keith. I'm here in the EOasis baseline repository. If you've been listening, you already know, probably already know a lot about baseline, but in the case that you are new, the work that you always been talking about with SRI, BRI3, the whole project can be found in, of course, examples. Within examples, we have the BRI3 folder that contains the whole project. It itself is more of a monorepo style with a front-end folder as well as a Nest.js project at the top level. I'm going to move over into pull requests, where we're going to take a look at some of the pull requests that have been merged into the baseline repository main branch since the last time we went into a general assembly. Now you have to forgive me, it's been a while, so I may not start off in the at the perfect timeline that matches the last time we spoke. Hopefully I'll have some overlap so there's no gaps. Probably the last time we had a general assembly was near the beginning of milestone 4. So milestone 4 includes a lot of the heavy cryptographic lifting of implementing ZK circuits, implementing different Merkle tree structures to track the overall state and history within the BPI. If you're not familiar with BPI or the terms, work group and workflow, we do suggest you go back and view some of the previous videos. I'll try to account for that as I'm speaking, but as has been mentioned numerous times, the standard is complex. So we suggest you go back and either read through the standard or watch our previous videos. So since the beginning of milestone 4, let's see, where's a good place to start? I think I'll start probably storage agent mock, Merkle tree, CRUD, happy. Okay, we have this implement ZK circuit using Snark.js. It might have been a little bit before here, maybe Merkle tree, CRUD. So I'll start off with that because, of course, this is a PR I'm familiar with. It's one that I made. And as you'll notice, mine have the most comments when compared to the PRs around it, sometimes triple or quadruple. I like to think because that's a testament to how good they are, but in fact, it may be the opposite, right? So any CRUD merge or CRUD PR is generally, as we look through the file, is going to be and this underlying infrastructure within the Nest.js project to set up, possibly including some API endpoints if those points need to be hit externally, and if not, just internally the agents and methods, functions, possibly services needed to do what we call CRUD for a Merkle tree. So this create, read, update, delete. You need to be able to create, you need to be able to pull from the database and read this thing. You need to be able to write over it, update certain portions of it, and possibly delete it. So this isn't to say that all of these functionalities are implemented. Generally, this is open to the developer. In this case, it was me to decide, which of these functionalities do we need? Which of them need to be externally facing at this point in time? And to put those into my PR so that they can be discussed 63 times with other people. So most of these will start off, if you look at the PR, you'll have kind of the change in the package JSON. It's just tracking the dependencies that are being used. In this case, the addition of Merkle-Tree.js and the types for Crypto.js, which comes stock in Node. Here we have a change to the Prisma schema. So we track our relational database schemas using Prisma. When you update the Prisma schema, as you see I did here, I added a BPI Merkle-Tree model. This is adding probably most likely a full table to the database that's tracking this new information. Under the hood, this is handled by Prisma. So if you want to see how it's automatically done, you can go to the migration file that was created whenever I migrated the new schema, and you can see what it did. It created this new table, BPI Merkle-Tree, and of course, added these fields within the Merkle-Tree and set a primary key and constraint. After setting up kind of the underlying persistent tracking of Merkle-Trees in the database, I went through and created the infrastructure in the Nest.js project that allows these trees to be actually created and then saved, stored on that schema in the database, and then possibly let's see updated and so on and so forth. I'm sure I didn't get everything in one pull request, so we'll see what's here. Here's this just the creation of the, or there's just the addition of the Merkle module inside the kind of top level app module, because Nest.js is using this inversion of control and dependency injection, so it needs to be kind of aware of the modules that it's going to be injecting. We have the Merkle-Tree agent. So for us, we use agents somewhat as kind of like you'd expect a service layer. The agent contains the kind of in process or say during execution functionality that be contained within the service itself. So things like create a new Merkle-Tree. So if I send in the data that I want to create a new Merkle-Tree, well, eventually that'll end up in the agent calling this functionality, and we can trace it through and see what is it doing. It's creating an ID, it's accepting a hash algorithm, which is later replaced, and then it's calling this form Merkle-Tree, which is within the Merkle-Tree service, right? So there's a separation here. The agent is more just a collection of the overall actions you might want to take. Oh, I want to create a Merkle-Tree. I want to form this Merkle-Tree, create a hash function. And then we have a storage agent, which is on a similar level. Those actions you might want to take in respect to the relational database. It's managed through the RM Prisma. So do I want to tree a Merkle-Tree by ID? I want to store a new Merkle-Tree. I want to store an updated Merkle-Tree. I want to delete a Merkle-Tree. We have these underlying DTOs, as well as just normal classes we see here that kind of define the shape of these Merkle-Tree objects at some point in time during the flow, as it enters the service, as it's stored, as it comes out of storage, especially with Merkle-Trees. The way that it's being stored, the tree is being marshaled and unmarshaled into from its object form during execution to just a pure string form. So as you can imagine, when it comes out of the database, when it goes into the database, it's in a slightly different form in terms of the type of the tree, right? For TypeScript in this case. We have the DTOs for these particular situations. What should it look like if I'm creating a Merkle-Tree, updating, so on and so forth. Error messages that might happen. In this case, if I'm trying to retrieve one, I can't find one. The controller for the Merkle-Tree, in this case, these were externally facing APIs just for development purposes. So anybody after this is immediately merged and decides to work Merkle-Trees into their database and into their flow, that they could kind of easily command and work these in. Although these, of course, is not in main as it stands, because there's no need to kind of externally interface with the Merkle-Trees directly. And then we have these commands here. So if you've watched any of our videos, you're probably pretty familiar, or if you worked with Nest.js, you're familiar with this structure of commands and command handlers. Due to the inversion of control, we just make a command handler available to the controller, and it's executed when that controller API is hit, or when some other endpoint that's executing the command handler is hit. So in this case, we're going to create a Merkle-Tree command. So this command is injecting through the constructor. What do we need? A Merkle tree agent and a Merkle tree storage agent. And it's going to make use, it's going to combine the methods in a top to bottom order of what's the flow for creating this Merkle tree? Well, first we use the normal agent to actually create the tree kind of during execution. And then we take that tree that's been created that's in this kind of ephemeral memory, and we put that into persistent storage, and then we just return the ID of that thing that's been stored. So that's it, right? Since we're probably a little low on time, I'll just kind of quickly glance over some of the other things we did. So Merkle tree CRUD, we have Shri beginning her first of 5 PRs in implementing the ZK snark circuit. I almost said snurkit, which I guess kind of fits. Here we have things like, okay, here similar, you'll have the circuit agents, right? What are the things we can do? We can create a witness, create a proof. What does the structure of the proof look like? Right, here's classifying the structure of the proof. What does the witness look like? Same thing. An interface, a SnarkJS circuit service for actually doing these actions during execution time, creating the witness and creating the proof, so on and so forth. This first one, of course, is kind of very high level. We try to keep our PRs very broken down. And so, for example, this first one is, hey, let's lay the groundwork. What are the things we're going to need on an infrastructure level? We're going to need the controller, the agent, the command, so on and so forth. Let's fill them in with detail at a later time. We can, if we kind of scroll up, we see that there's going to be a part 2 here, or some more details, whatever the focus is of this PR is kind of filled in within these files. You see 5 files change, really easy for everybody to look at, see if they understand, review, and comment. Here we have something being added to get ignore, some documentation added for understanding of SnarkJS. We have some changes to the packages getting ready. And we have this, powers of Tau SH file here added for the powers of Tau ceremony. So just kind of, again, very low level. What do we need to get ready to make these circuits happen and to generate these proofs? Very simple stuff. Do I have more time to keep going, or should I pass it on? Am I low on time?
Let's
Nobody's
wrap
telling me.
there, just to get
Okay.
through a few more updates, but we would love to have more and more
Yeah, we can talk
walkthroughs
about it
on all
more.
the shows.
I'll wrap with saying that, if you take some time to look through here, you can see that the bulk of milestone 4 is going to be, again, as I said, implementing the Merkle tree services within the project, being able to manipulate those Merkle trees to track state trees, history trees, as well as the ZK circuits and the infrastructure surrounding that. And the automatic execution, let's say if a work step happens, that the circuit is procced and that a proof is generated and created and stored in the proper place and added to the Merkle tree, witness leaves, so on and so forth. So this is the kind of really the guts of the implementation here. The previous ones were all of the underlying infrastructure of what do work groups look like? How do I add people? Here's, workflows, here's accounts, here's all the kind of normal, almost Web 2-y stuff you'd expect in a way. And then here's kind of this addition of the special, more cryptographic-esque modules that add that flavor of kind of, automation, privacy, accuracy, correctness that have been added in milestone 4. So that's kind of the overall where we're at. Okay? And now I'll give it up.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you both for walking us through all of that. I know it's been a while and so much incredible progress has happened since. And we'll have no shortage of future baseline shows to get further and further into the weeds. All right, Yoav, can you give us the lowdown on the interop work group?
Yes, very quickly though, first, with what Keith started off mentioning was that if you're kind of newer to the community or don't have a super technical understanding of baseline protocol itself, all of the different, terminology and everything, Keith gave a great presentation a year and change ago in Amsterdam called The Basics, which is fully uploaded to YouTube. And there's also a blog written on that. And so it's sort of in text form. Both of those are excellent resources, I would say, to get you started and have an understanding of a starting point, so that then when you read all of the 3-4 letter acronyms throughout the repo, you kind of understand what's being accomplished. Okay, great, thank you. Oh, I just shook my Zoom and it minimized all of my windows. Just a second. Okay, getting into interop. So within, I will share my screen again, within the baseline repo, under examples, same spot as Keith was showing where you can find BRI1, you can also find BPI interop folder. And this folder has a high level README here that will kind of outline everything that is important to this work group thus far. And I think it's worth kind of going over some of the things that can be found here. For starters, of course, like anything I talk about here, the work groups meet regularly. In this case, interop meets every Friday. Anybody is welcome to join in, kind of spectate or be a part of it, understand more about what we're up to, or be as involved as little or as much as you are interested in.
Oh, we
There's
need to
also-
update the time. We need to update the time.
Yes,
I
it's
just
shifted a
realized.
half hour. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Need to do it.
Yeah.
Need to do a PR.
For anyone looking at this on the call, add half an hour to any of these times for the new updated time. And then, of course, there is, like all of our work groups that are open source, a drive with all of the notes that are being updated after each work group session. For anybody that cannot attend, can update themselves asynchronously. But kind of most importantly here in this README is the use case itself. This is something that the work group discussed at length and kind of worked together for quite a good bit of time to solidify the underlying use case, the underlying kind of purpose that this demo will demonstrate. So what we landed on is to validate banking data between an enterprise and a bank without exchanging the banking data itself. The purpose of this is twofold. It's to reduce the risk on the business because of course, zero knowledge and zero trust allows you to transact using kind of sensitive PII without the risk of any of that getting leaked. And also to reduce cost is the second motivation that a enterprise would have to implement such a process. So all that motivation is kind of outlined here, why you would want to implement this from a business perspective. And then it goes into more technical details of how exactly that will take place. So we have the high level description here. We have our participants, which is the customer of the corp, the Acme Corp itself, the bank of that customer, and an auditor who will verify that everything has been kind of correctly transacted. Going into the more technical side of what that would actually look like for two baseline protocol implementations to kind of work together on either side of the fence here in order to make that happen, again, under zero knowledge and within the zero trust architecture, which is the main appeal here of why you would want to do this in the first place. So you have two work groups, work group 1, which is in BPI A, and work group 2, which is in BPI B. And that is kind of the crux of interoperability, the demonstration here that two completely separate BPIs, baseline protocol implementations, are able to work in tandem together in order to kind of complete this. Because thus far, all BPI, like the SRI, BRI3, all of these implementations work self-contained within themselves and run tests on itself. So this is to demonstrate that it's not just, reference implementations that we have, but that we can demonstrate these BPIs can transact together. So you
It's
have the
really,
two.
oh,
Go ahead.
if I might interrupt, it's really
Yeah,
like an
please.
anti-phishing, like an anti-social engineering type of integration, right? Because companies, they receive requests all the time, either through phone or through email, to say, hey, I'm Jim from accounts receivable from vendor XYZ. Please change banking data from this to that. And there's those attacks are getting more and more sophisticated, both internal and external, right? Especially with AI, right? So how can you trust the data that you receive? To change this? How do you know that it's worthwhile to change that? ZK and the zero trust principle is really great, because if you had any doubts whatsoever of the authenticity of however the state came in, you could verify it and say, yes, this resolved to this exact data, this exact person that I'm transacting with. Because otherwise, right, like things can get very convincing. Like people who are thinking up of social engineering attempts even before AI, right? And if you work at a large company, you're probably very familiar with different anti-phishing, anti-social engineering trainings that are trying to teach people to be very vigilant. But what if you could add like this extra layer of resilience that's still very privacy preserving, that you're not giving away, like, hey, yeah, the bank number is at 1 2 3 4 5, right? That's where the privacy aspect of this really shines, I think.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I can
good,
interrupt that interruption just to add on. I believe the latest hack of MGM by the Scattered Spiders
stole it
started
from
with
me.
social engineering. Are you going to say that?
It always
Great minds think alike. Yeah.
it always does, right? These are always very human type of errors, right?
Another like even more basic surface level example is the man who would send fake invoices to, I think, Google, and realized that if it was below some threshold, I think $10,000, they wouldn't even review it. They would just approve because it wasn't worth the time of the finance department. And so he ended up getting millions of dollars before anybody investigated and realized that they were just totally bogus invoices that should never have been filled out. So yeah, it's definitely that human error of just automating things as much as possible and removing the risk with zero knowledge and zero trust just allows for a lot of these things to just be avoided. Yeah.
And it's even internal in a way, right? Unfortunately, people can sometimes scam their own company, right? To kind of gamify like the approval limits, and kind of I worked at a company where we caught one time where someone had figured out how to bypass the whole PO approval system and just get different invoices approved all the time. We had to shut it down. But certainly the getting the authenticity of a request down, because the reality is that you have to make this tech very adaptable to kind of like very everyday business, where there's a lot of automation, there's a lot of cloud stuff, AI things, but people are still going to initiate business manually through email, through phone call. And like, how do you sift through that in a way that makes it super resilient from like phishing attempts?
Baseline
Or Axiom,
how.
if your choices go there, which I chose, but you could go anywhere you want. That's what Interop's about.
That's right. Awesome. Good discussion. All that's left here really just quickly is kind of the workflow of how that'll go through. And this is kind of further into the weeds. I won't get too caught up here. I know we're short on time. But for anybody who wants to kind of do their own homework here, this outlines how the two different work groups will interact using the different work steps in this workflow here. So here it is all in plain text, and then here's kind of a nice visual representation of all of these different transactions to send between the different work groups and to verify the data and bring back proofs and validate all these proofs and ensure that kind of the pitch is sound. And I think that's where I'll leave it off thanks to time. So I'm handing this over to sorry, Andreas for standards work. Thank you. When I
Yes.
find my
Last
sharing.
but certainly not least, so we have 8 open PRs that the editors still need to review, which for various reasons has been very stagnant for the last 4 or 5 months, 6 months. We'll need to have, I guess, a meeting to get that backlog, because more PRs are coming as we're adding more testability statements. There's so many PRs because the number of testability statements being added has been, to just subsections rather than a whole section, because that could, as in one case, be like 100 testability statements in one PR, which is hard to review. So that's ongoing. Where 5.5 is still outstanding, as well as section 3 and section 4. So section 3 is currently being worked on. There's going to be a PR coming up. So we should be, hopefully before the end of the year, ready to, if we get all the PRs merged, ready to go to the PGB and request this to be in an official draft from release. And that's why the interop work is super important. We need to have these, we need to have 2 reference implementations showing that they can meet all the requirements, and interop is one of the requirements. So you need at least 2 implementations, and to become a full standard, we need 2 reference implementations. So it becomes a bit of a circular argument, but most importantly, the interop work is absolutely critical in order to move the standard then from draft to final, which we really want to try to get done next year as quickly as possible, so that we can put a pin in it, because it's a significant body of work, and we have been at it for 3 years, and we need to come to a conclusion. So that's it.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to breeze through just a couple of final updates from the TSC side. Our Gitcoin project that was approved about a month ago had the funding round closed 22 days ago. We raised $3,077 by 2,084 contributors, which is very exciting because the Gitcoin grant program uses quadratic funding. So the more contributors, the better in our multiplier to get higher allocations from the fund that Gitcoin allocates to the projects in the ecosystem to give back to projects that are promoting public goods and have a community following. So super exciting. We'll see what comes from that soon. The technical steering committee is also working on another grant application for funding for the interop work. We'll give an update on that in the future. And very soon, we will also start sharing information for the upcoming TSC elections for the 2023-24 Technical Steering Committee. So the call to nominations will open soon. So if you yourself are interested in being on the committee or have a person in mind who you think has been a great contributor or would be one, please start thinking through that, and we will share the info on how to submit that. And in the meantime, if you haven't submitted a PR in the last 6 months, please do so, because that will give you voter eligibility for the TSC elections. So all the details about the upcoming elections will be very clear in the baseline Slack and across our socials in the next few weeks. So there will be no room for any missed information there. And we're going to start that process starting Monday. So keep an eye out, and we need as much participation as we can get for a very impactful following year. I think that is all we have for this General Assembly, just because of time. I know there was lots to cover, and also, of course, conversations along the way, because it's been a few weeks since we've had a baseline show. So we will see everyone next week, and we can pick up where we left off and have room for open floors as well. Would love to hear what Ryan, you, and others in the community are up to. So thank you all so much. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yoav.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
No, thank you, Keith.
I agree.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
That was live.